Ronald Reagan, a man who many Americans think is one of the greatest presidents in American history. Reagan came at a perfect time that was ripe for a conservative wave that changed the American political scene for many years, and is still, arguably, influencing modern politics today. Reagan wanted to achieve three goals throughout his presidency: improve the economy, resist and bring about the destruction of the Soviet Union, and spread the idea that liberalism and government is the main cause of America's many problems. The Reagan Revolution swept over America. Let me introduce our guest to everyone, Kevin Abney, my godfather. Mr. Abney was a college student when the Reagan Revolution was in full force. Mr. Abney was a strong supporter of Reagan and has even seen him 4 times in his life. He has also done a project with several of Reagan's cabinet members, which he was able to converse with for a weekend. I think this is proof enough that Mr. Abney is an expert in all things Reagan. Let's get started. I've always wondered why Ronald Reagan was so popular and loved by so many people, even today. So I'm going to ask you, why do you think Reagan was so popular with the American people? In fact, a C-SPAN poll has Reagan ranked as the 9th best president of the United States in 2017.
His mass appeal was basically this: Americans wanted to feel good about themselves again. We'd been through Watergate, political corruption, the Vietnam War, and all that ugly period. And then Jimmy Carter was coming along, and he was supposed to be, just kind of like a really good moral leader, but he didn't end up being a strong American leader. So Reagan offered a chance for the people of America to feel good about themselves, feel patriotic.
That's very interesting about his mass appeal, but I want to get on a more personal level now, Mr. Abney. Do you have any personal stories or connections with Reagan or possibly with Reagan's cabinet?
Yeah, for me it was personal too, because I told you I was born in the Chicago area, but when I was in high school, middle high school years, which is a terrible time to have to move, my dad had to transfer jobs. So we moved from the Chicago area over to Sterling, Rock Falls, Dixon area. And my dad was actually the chief probation officer in Dixon, Illinois. And that's where Reagan grew up. He was from there. So there was a lot of excitement during this period because obviously a guy from Northern Illinois who became president, his home was there in Dixon, and it was actually 2 blocks from where my dad worked. So I started getting to know people, and over all through this time up to the modern time, I've gotten to know people that were close personal friends, with Reagan at different stages of his life.
It's very cool that you have a personal connection with Reagan living in the same town. That's very cool. So I've heard that you've actually campaigned for Reagan during his re-election campaign. How was that?
When I was at NIU in 84, it was the re-election of Reagan. And Reagan, I knew he was going to win in a landslide and so forth. So I was on a break between classes for Christmas and stuff, and I went down to the Republican office locally and just signed up to be a volunteer. So it was just local stuff. I wasn't like close on the national campaign, but local stuff, making calls, helping out with sending out letters, things like that.
Since you've campaigned for Reagan in the past, did you ever go to one of his rallies and or speeches? Do you have any cool stories about those?
February 6, 1984, when your dad and I were he was coming back for a visit to Dixon, so I was staying in touch with that. I was literally the first person in line to get a ticket in advance, and then my dad and I went to hear him come back and speak at Dixon. We were in the gym which was high school, because he had gone to high school in Dixon, and it was for his 73rd birthday, and that was really cool, because Nancy was there, and his brother Neil, and the governor of Illinois, and all that. So I had a tape recorder, and I still have the live tape of that whole day's events. And then after the event, my dad and I were walking back out to our car, and we literally were standing on the street, and limousine passed us, and at that stage we were like 4 feet from him and Nancy. Literally, waved at and stuff. But at the end, I positioned myself, where he would be leaving, and I had a picture of his house from Dixon, and I held it up and yelled over to him, and I said, "This is Dixon, where you grew up," and it caught his attention, and he ended up signing an autograph for me, and that was pretty cool.
It's so cool, Mr. Abney, to hear about all these cool and interesting stories that you've been able to see Reagan and interact with him sometimes. And now I'm going to ask a more serious question. How did you react when Ronald Reagan got shot?
I very specifically remember I was at NIU, and it was before I knew your dad, and I have a friend that I'm still in touch with named Jackie, and different Jackie than your mom, and we're very good friends, and I've been in touch with her over the years, and Glenda finally got to meet her a couple of years ago, and this is what she told Glenda. She goes, "Back in college, I remember when Reagan got shot, and Kevin was very upset, and we thought it was kind of like, why is he upset about it?" And then her words to Glenda said, now I understand. In other words, she kind of grasped the whole situation, plus understood Reagan's place in history.
Now we're going to move to the topic on the Soviet Union. We all know Reagan hated the Soviet Union, so is there one moment in particular that you remember about Reagan's strong rhetoric on the Soviet Union?
Again, he was true to himself, because in politics and government, you have just a huge group of advisors. And a lot of political advisors like to be careful and always worry about the polls and everything. And Reagan was going to Germany to make a speech in front of the Bamberg Gate. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And one of his speechwriters said, put in the speech, you should challenge Mr. Gorbachev to take down the wall. Well, that speech was circulating around the White House, and some of the other advisors said, "No, you can't say that. It's going to offend such and such and everything." And Reagan would, you're too busy to write every word of your speeches, but when you're at that level.
Mm-hmm.
But when the speech came to him, he did review it and added his set all that in motion.
You've told me about the Reagan Project before. Can you explain to me more about it and how the experience was?
This is just in the last couple of years. Like I said, I was asked because I did a Lincoln project for 20 years, but I also did a Reagan project for, about 15 years. And I personally made contact with a ton of people that were associated with Reagan. His family, his people in his administration, political opponents, and on and on and on. But anyway, when Reagan announced that he had Alzheimer's, there was a lot of attention, admiration. People loved Reagan. So I had this stuffed elephant that had been obtained from the state fair in California, and Reagan, as governor, signed the ear, and it was kind of a dumb-looking, big old stuffed elephant. Glenda hated it, but I thought, I'm going to turn that into a pincushion of all the people that knew Reagan. So it started this project, and I would send them these buttons, and with a marker, they would sign the buttons, and then I would put the buttons on. And I did that for years, and then when Reagan died, I continued it, and got to know some of these people. They'd send me gifts. They would,
I think we all know the answer to this question, but how successful, Mr. Abney, do you think Ronald Reagan's presidency was?
I think he's going to go down in history as one of the great presidents. It doesn't mean that there's some that disagree or whatever, but I think his mark in history is huge.